Hello, everybody. We've got a lot of folks that are joining in. I know, excited to have you guys all with us this, I guess, afternoon for our webinar on the economic impact of the Empire State Trail and highlighting our new report that's being released. We're going to give it a couple of minutes just to let everybody come on in. We've had a ton of interest in this webinar and want to make sure everybody who's registered has a chance to listen along and hear our great findings from our report.
And Dylan, you said we have what, like 250 or more folks joining us today?
Yeah. It's
What a great crowd.
I think clearly demonstrates that there's a lot of interest in learning more about this report that we just released earlier this week, and a lot of folks that are interested in the impact of the Empire State Trail.
Yeah, I was looking at the guest list, and we have certainly a lot of folks from in and around New York State, as you would expect. But I saw several folks from further afield, around the country and even around the world. So I think that maybe speaks to the
Yeah.
growing recognition that the Empire State Trail is now a international destination.
Yeah, I think it's the most comprehensive, the most robust study of a trail system that has ever been done, and I think we'll keep saying that until somebody shows us one that's more robust or does one that's more robust.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a cease and desist yet, so yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just keep saying that. Yeah,
Uh, um, we'll give it just another minute or so for folks to join in. But yeah.
and for those of you who came on time, thank you very much. Um, we have with us here today really the people who not only made this study possible, but are really working all year long to make the trail better, expand the trail. As you'll see from the first couple slides, there's a wonderful and growing community of advocates, professionals, state electeds, agency folks who are all pulling together to bring the trail to more New Yorkers. And that's going to be my favorite part, is going to be listening to Dylan talking about how we're going to be leveraging this study to further that advocacy work.
So I think we can get started. I know some folks are still joining in, but I just wanted to start with some quick introductions, and then I'm going to turn it over to Paul here in a second. I'm Dylan Carey. I'm Director of Policy and Planning for Parks and Trails New York. I'm joined on the call by my colleague Erica Schneider, who's our Policy and Planning Manager, and Paul Steely-White, our Executive Director, who I'm going to turn it over to in just a second. We're also joined by Michael Coquite, who is the program manager from LaBella Associates, and Steve Burt with the Institute for Transportation Research and Education. I'll let them introduce themselves in a little bit. We're going to turn to them to talk through the process of completing this report and go through some of the methodology and the work that was done to have this great final product. And we were thrilled to be able to work with the LaBella and the ITRI team on completing this report. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to kick us off and introduce us to Parks and Trails New York.
Hey, thanks, Dylan. And thanks all of you for coming today and taking some time out from your busy days to hear more about this report. And again, the larger effort to expand our trail network and to improve it and connect it to more New Yorkers. I'm the executive director of Parks and Trails New York, as Dylan mentioned, and it's such an honor and a privilege to work for this wonderful organization. It's 40 years old. PTNY is 40 years old, and our main job really is to look out for our public lands, right? Make sure that we're defending the state budget that funds these places, growing the state budget that funds these places, but also really activating folks around the state. There's so many people now who are experiencing our parks and trails and want to give back, right? They want other people to have the experience of being in nature and really making access to nature and being outside more a part of our everyday lives. And so that's really why we exist at PTNY. Some of you maybe have been on some of our bike tours, you've been to our volunteer days, maybe even some of you have been to our annual advocacy day that we do with our close valued partners at Open Space Institute. But really, I think all of us are so excited to be here with you today because all of you on this call are supporting our work. Some of you are funding our work. And I encourage all of you to join Parks and Trails New York as members. We are a membership organization. We're an independent nonprofit. Next slide. But we also work with a cast of state agencies that are so vital to continuing and furthering this work and really leading it. You see New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, OPRHP, their commissioner, Kathy Moser, who's a hero of mine and really just an amazing leader. At the press conference to release this report on Tuesday, Kathy made the great point that businesses looking to locate or relocate in New York State, they used to ask about golf courses. And now they want to know about the trail. They want their employees to have these experiences. And while this report doesn't quantify the economic value of all those businesses moving to the trail or wanting to be near the trail, it is a huge part of the economic value of the trail itself and being an attractor for investment and talent. Next slide. I think all of us see people using the trail, right? I think anecdotally, experientially, we see, our neighbors on the trail. I'm calling here in New Paltz. I'm usually in Albany, but I'm in New Paltz today. And the Empire State Trail runs like a few yards outside my door there. And it's the main street for New Paltz. It's where you see your neighbors. It's where people walk their dogs. It's where people are getting daily exercise. We see people spending money. We see so much activity, but until this report, we never really had a solid sort of quantifiable assessment of what the trail really is doing for New York State's economy. Next slide. And we wanted to measure that impact because we obviously, as advocates, we want to do that to further future investment. And when we thought about the kind of study that the Empire State Trail required, we realized that we were probably going to be embarking on the biggest, most comprehensive assessment ever done for a trail or trail network. And I think that's fitting because the Empire State Trail is the largest, longest multi-use trail in the United States, connecting New York City to Canada, Buffalo to Albany. And you see there are the sections in yellow that are still on-road sections that we still need to close the gaps in. And Dylan will talk about that in just a moment. Next slide. And when we look at the Empire State Trail and how vast it is and how it connects New York State towns and counties and parks, and thinking about the trail not just as the trail itself, but the land and activity that's adjacent to it. And that was one of the eye-opening things for me in embarking on this study with LaBella Associates and the Institute for Transportation Research and Education, is that the trail is having an impact far beyond its immediate borders and really influencing and transforming communities within a few miles of the trail itself. Next. And this is the big top line number, right? These are the numbers that were on the cover of the Times Union today. We were on the front page of the Times Union, which was very nice to see. And you can see the coverage in many other outlets. So it's making a big splash already. And I think the reason why the report is making such a splash is because these numbers are so impressive. Almost $2 billion of annual economic impact, which I was telling my kids that's about the same impact as the Taylor Swift Eras Tour made. That was a record-breaking tour, right? Made headlines around the world. This is something that we're doing every year. Encore is happening 365 days a year, right? So it's a big deal. And the visits that you see there, almost 10 million visits. There's only one national park of the 455 national parks that we have: Yosemite, Yellowstone, Zion, Acadia. Only one attracts more visitors than the Empire State Trail, and that's Great Smoky Mountains. So we can think of our Empire State Trail as this leading asset that we have, that the world is taking notice of, and all of that spending, all that economic activity is returning tax money to local counties and to New York State. And so really, I think what we have here in the Empire State Trail is not just a world-class recreation amenity. What we have here is a leading economic development tool. So anytime New York State is thinking about how to bring jobs and how to stoke the economy, of course, tax abatements and stadiums will always be part of that. But I think what we have in the Empire State Trail is something that's just as effective as those sort of traditional economic development strategies, but also brings all these other benefits: public health, environment, et cetera. And we'll hear about that in just a sec. Next slide. And now, I think, is it time to turn it over to you, Dylan? Okay,
Yeah,
awesome. We have a great team at Parks and Trails New York, and Dylan is our planning and policy senior director. And it's a privilege to work with you, Dylan. So take it away.
thank you, Paul. I think that, I know folks are excited to hear more about the findings from the report and, Steve and Michael are going to dive into the findings in a lot more detail and dive into the methodology. I did want to highlight a couple of other things, and I'll also add the link into the chat that where the report can be found because it is up on our website currently. But a couple of kind of interesting key findings that really stood out for me in reviewing the final version of the report was that, you know, it's a smart way to invest funding. It's a smart way to spend public money. Every dollar invested in the trail generates over $5 in economic output. And we also found that off-road sections of trail have 4 times as much economic impact as on-road sections of trail. The ability to draw a wider array of folks to a trail system, and then also seeing higher levels of trail use really are what's driving that. Um, it's an important health benefit for community members, and you can quantify the value of that as well. And Steve and Michael are going to talk about the process of doing that. But 38% of trail users rely on the Empire State Trail for at least half of their weekly physical health. It really is an important factor in that broader sense of community health. Real estate values are boosted by being near the trail. You see that lots near the trail average as much as a $50,000 premium in value over comparable properties. People want to live near high quality trails, and the numbers bear that out. And then 68% of trail users drive fewer miles because the trail is available. The Empire State Trail, this study helps demonstrate that the Empire State Trail really should be seen as a key part of a sustainable future for New York, as a linchpin of a successful transportation and economic development strategy. So I'm actually going to sort of flip the script a little bit and talk about what's next at PTNY, what we're going to be doing with this report before turning it back over to Michael and Steve to dive into the findings in a little bit more detail. So next slide, Erica. So, obviously, as I just mentioned, the report highlights that the on-road stretches of the Empire State Trail have a lot more impact than do the off-road stretches. And we think that that's a clear call for investing in closing those remaining gaps in the Empire State Trail. There's 265 miles of the Empire State Trail that remain as on-road facilities, including 100 miles of key on-road gaps that limit the ability of the trail to be a truly all ages and abilities facility that is able to draw trail visitors and trail users from around the world and also provide a safe place for people in all of these communities. So we're going to be focusing on how we can use this study to call attention to the need to close some of these key gaps in the Empire State Trail and provide that truly continuous off-road experience that trail users are looking for. Next slide. We also know that the trail passes through, and again, Michael and Steve will talk about some of the process of looking at this, but the trail passes through communities that are categorized by Empire State Development as moderately or severely distressed. Two-thirds of the trail passes through those moderately or severely distressed communities, but for too many of those places, the benefits that the trail generates aren't fully realized by all residents of those places. So, what can we do to make sure that the trail doesn't just pass by some of these communities, that we have safe connections, that people from all neighborhoods are able to safely access the trail, and we can ensure that it is truly an equitable resource for communities. How can we invest in those connector trails between the spine of the Empire State Trail and nearby communities and make sure that all New Yorkers have safe access to this high quality amenity? And then finally, as you look at the Empire State Trail, obviously the spine, that sort of sideways T that we see of the Erie Canalway Trail, the Hudson Valley Greenway Trail, and the Champlain Valley Trail is great as long as you're fairly close to those places. And there's so many parts of the state that the trail doesn't yet reach. So how can we call for an additional investment in extending the Empire State Trail and building out greenway networks in those parts of the state that the trail doesn't yet touch? How can we complete the Long Island Greenway, invest in seeing that project completed? How can we invest in closing gaps in some of the regional networks in Western New York and making sure that those benefits are able to be realized? And so we're going to be looking at, hundreds and hundreds of miles of priority expansion corridors that can really help bring the Greenway, bring the state's Greenway network to that next level and allow these benefits that this report clearly demonstrates to be felt by more communities in more places. Um, so that is what PTNY is going to be using this report to help activate. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our partners with LaBella Associates and the Institute for Transportation Research and Education at NC State University to talk through the process of how we got to these numbers, to dig into the findings a little bit more and really show us how we got to this point. So, Michael, do you want to take it over?
Sounds great. Appreciate it, Dylan. Good afternoon, everyone. To start off, when we're looking at this opportunity here at LaBella Associates, we're a pretty large architecture engineering firm, about 2,000 employees. And when we looked at the robust nature of this study, we realized very quickly before we even put in a proposal that we needed a strong team and partners were going to be essential to our success. And so with that, we immediately reached out to North Carolina University, the Institute of Transportation Research and Education. And they had experience in taking the data that we knew we had the capacity to collect and crunching those numbers. So you'll hear from Stephen a little bit about how we work through collaborating, bringing all that data together and bringing the information forward into these findings. And then we realized along the way that we really needed a more robust tool in order to calculate those trail visitations and find out how many people and where they were visiting the trail. Verity Engineering have been doing that for years, so pulled them into the team as well. So all of us then working together with the strong leadership of Parks and Trails New York, and of course all the state agency partners made this all possible. So, but it was definitely a Herculean effort. We can jump to the next one. When we look at the trail itself, go ahead. It's broken up. As you see, the Empire State Trail has 3 distinct sections. And we thought it was really important, and Parks and Trails New York advised us to break up those sections as well. So that would help us to better understand the differences between the Erie Canalway Trail, Champlain Valley Trail, and the Hudson Valley Greenway. We've also analyzed it even more meticulously as we've looked through. So we can really give this report out and people can look at their local communities and even breaking it down county by county. But in those different areas, you can see quickly in this map of the Empire State Trail where those on-road and off-road sections exist and the nature of each. Go to the next one. So in that breakup, we have the Buffalo to Albany section, our Albany to the Canadian border, and then finally New York City up to Albany. Go ahead, next click. In that first section from Buffalo to Albany, it's the longest and oldest segment. Characterized by that Erie Canalway towpath for the distance across, and a blend of current canal areas and also historic, where the canal has moved on, but the canalway, that corridor still exists. Next. Second, we have the northern section, and this really presents the largest opportunities, tapping into rural communities and creating those benefits we'll talk about a little bit later as we notice when we look community to community. And then next one. And then finally, we have the Greenway tying down into New York City. And we had to be really careful with this section because we wanted to make sure that our analysis was gathering that information and not overly recognizing the robust traffic and movement around New York City. So we're very careful and conservative in our approach to make sure to account for that. But it is a high utilization. You'll see in the numbers coming up and creates a lot of benefit. So go ahead, next slide. So as we look to engage the public and gather this data, we started in the summer with our initiation and basically did about 3 months of work in 3 weeks because we knew we had to get out there on the Empire State Trail. And one of those things was coordinating volunteers. We thought it was really important that we met the volunteers. We trained them on how to perform these intercept surveys and share this information and gather data in a really succinct way. So I got on my bike was the solution to that and literally traveled through that corridor and then the PTNY team supporting in their geographic locations and other LaBella offices. And we were able to physically meet with these. We did online trainings, but also met with these volunteers. We had over 100 volunteers and working through that public engagement through August to November. Then snow started falling, I think the day after we closed the survey. It was amazing. Like, we timed it just right. From December into April, we did that data analysis, leading into the writing the report and the findings here in June. So we had a tight window, but that was by design. We wanted to make sure to take a snapshot that was collective of from summer going through the fall to get a range of seasons and a range of information, but also taking that close picture so that we know right now and get the report out quickly so we see that current information. Go ahead, next slide. Here's a certain spot. Go ahead and write in the chat if you know where this location is. Useless bonus points will be awarded. So here's an example of an intercept survey. We're out on the Empire State Trail collecting that data and sharing information. A lot of people we ran into didn't have time to take the survey. They were exercising, they were on their run for the day, or just generally people aren't comfortable talking to this random guy in bike shorts that comes walking up to them with a bunch of business cards and signs on his bicycle. So we also have business cards printed up with the QR code that we shared online and a variety of other ways gathering data through our online resources. That was the long form, as you'll hear it called, a much more robust survey. We have over 1,000 responses, people taking the time to provide their information. A lot of our health information came from that long form survey and other data points that you'll see. And then finally, we really wanted to know the impact on businesses. We were able to calculate it with our intercept surveys and our long form surveys, but we also wanted to hear from businesses themselves. So PTNY has a phenomenal list of local trail-oriented businesses, but we wanted to reach beyond that as well. So we were able to connect with all of the county and local chamber of commerce within the corridor and get the word spread out and data collected from those businesses as well as an impartial tool. Next. All right, so our research methods and how did we pull all this together? So first, for our economic impact components, we relied heavily on those surveys, both online and intercept in person on the Empire State Trail. By the way, intercept surveys could only be completed physically on the Empire State Trail. That was a key training to all of our volunteers and obviously us from the team out there. Second, we looked at those expenditure profiles throughout the entire corridor. We used tools with our GIS analysis, as you can see some graphics from here. And then finally, using different modeling tools, we're able to extrapolate that information out and create an economic model across the entire 750-mile corridor. When we looked at visitation estimates, because obviously trail counters are incredibly helpful, but they're a tool. We had to drive further than that. So we had our trail counters, and we also looked at corridor analyses and visitation estimates, again, based on those tools that Steve from ITRI will talk in further detail on later. By the way, Lauren, congratulations. That is Waterford. You get the useless bonus points. Next slide. As we looked at physical health implications, we wanted to be sure we were accurate about this. I want to dive a little deeper because I'm sure there'll be some questions in this area. To head that off, one, we utilized those surveys to gather that data. We weren't working on assumptions. This was a data-driven report. Second, the physical activity profiles were provided and based from that survey data. And then finally, we used the most conservative monetization tools to provide those numbers. So there are other approaches that would have probably created more robust, beautiful, larger numbers. We took the conservative approach. We wanted this to be defensible. And most importantly, it's backed in the survey and the data we collected out on the Empire State Trail and across the state. When we looked at environmental benefits, there's a lot of ways to boost these numbers. We did the opposite. Our folks at ITRI, you can see a really great graphic here on the right side of the slide of the carbon storage and sequestration. We looked at grid by grid, they call it a fish scale, across the entire corridor of what is the land use, what are the different characteristics of that land use area, so that we got the most accurate number possible, rather than just assuming that it's a full benefit. When we looked at alternative trip analysis, this wasn't assuming that if someone rode their bike on the Empire State Trail, that they weren't driving their car that distance. We've seen that methodology used before. We avoided that. We asked in the surveys, if you were not to exercise on the Empire State Trail, how far would you travel in order to perform this exercise? So this wasn't replacing walking and bicycle miles with assumed, right, vehicular traffic. This is replacing what would be vehicular traffic without it. So again, a very conservative approach. And then our land preservation, you can see here, looking at those very distinct zones. What are the land use areas and what's the preservation value on the carbon storage and sequestration of those areas? All right, with here, I'll hand it over to the smart guy in the group and much better looking than myself. So Steve, if you want to take it away from ITRI.
Thanks for the nice compliment, Michael. I guess we could throw that in the chat to see what viewers think about that. But this is really what I get excited about when we're talking about economic impact. It was mentioned that I'm from North Carolina. We're currently working frenetically to try to create a tourism draw in the state of North Carolina. Where we're thinking about Carolina Thread Trail as an asset to bring people to the state. New York already has it. When you look at the Empire State Trail, the 750-mile largest multi-use trail in the country, take a look at the image on screen and you see there's already a use case where tourism is being brought to the state for a multi-day trip experience. It's a little bit difficult to see, but in the upper right corner, there is a list price of $3,700 per user. So this is just one example of how the Empire State Trail becomes a business case for tourism. And
Steve, if I can just chime in real quick, if you want to experience the Empire State Trail for a much more reasonable price, I invite you to join one of Parks and Trails New York's annual bike tours. We have Cycle the Erie Canal every July and Cycle the Hudson Valley every August, and those are fractions of the amount, of the price to join one of those tours, as what the smaller sort of boutique tour offers.
Great point, Dylan. And I'll get into some of the price variation a little bit more on the next slide. But in addition to being a draw for tourism, the Empire State Trail is also an attractor for everyday users who pair trail use with visits to businesses along the trail. So, Erica, you can move to the next slide. Across the state, there are more than 44,000 businesses that are located within a quarter mile of the trail. Many of these businesses benefit from trail user foot traffic, either from visits directly before using the trail or directly after using the trail. But this can also result as a visit to a business when individuals make an overnight stay. So on average, we see that daily trail users spend approximately $30 per visit, while overnight trail users spend about $540 per trip. So previous slide, we saw a list price of $3,700. That's definitely more on the higher end of the spectrum, but then we also have people that may decide to camp, stay overnight on the lower end of the spectrum. But when we evaluated our data, on average, we found that overnight trail users spend about $540 per trip. And then additionally, an estimated 41% of businesses within a quarter mile of the trail actually reinvest in their businesses to make physical improvements. This could include signage, bike racks, water fountains, or they may be willing to pay an additional rent premium to be located within close proximity to the trail. And on average, these businesses spend about $3,100 over the course of a year. Next slide, please. And then when we think about the economic impacts of the Empire State Trail, we can really see that it's a substantial asset for the state of New York. The trail generates $1.8 billion in economic output. This is equivalent to creating nearly $5 million in economic activity every day of the year. The trail supports about 9,700 jobs statewide, and more than half of these are supported by the Hudson Valley Greenway Trail corridor alone. This underscores the corridor's role as one of the most significant trail-based economic drivers in the state. But there's also substantial impact supported by the Erie Canalway corridor. When we look at that level of job support, it's equivalent to the workforce of the village of Owego or the town of Ticonderoga, excuse me, North Carolinian here, Ticonderoga, and then that really equates to the full impact of a local economy worth of employment. And then even though the Champlain Canalway Trail Corridor is lesser than the other corridors, it's still supporting over 500 jobs. And that's roughly equivalent to the workforce of a regional hospital or one of the largest employers in many of the rural communities along the trail. Next
Said
slide.
I had to jump in and correct him on anything.
Thank
We
you.
love
Please
our
do.
friends in Ticonderoga. I just want to throw that out there. Great people, wonderful area.
Thanks, and sorry for the mispronunciation. Thank you, Michael. Okay, next slide, please. And then I will be handing it back over to you, Michael, to discuss the environmental benefits and physical health benefits of the trail.
No problem. Jumped in too soon. All right, let's jump to our next slide here. So when we looked at health benefits, the major point that's so challenging, how do we turn it into a dollar, right? And how do you really measure that? And so we thought it's very important to do that. And through our strategies, we're able to put out those dollar points in cost savings. Obviously, with healthcare, there's a whole mental health we can't capture and well-being, but that the financial sides of health benefits, reduce healthcare costs, things like that. But the physical activity was absolutely incredible. As we were out there on the Empire State Trail completing these surveys and data, the number of people we talked to, that a vast majority of their exercise is coming from there. And in fact, 38% of those responders were saying that the majority of their exercise literally comes from using the Empire State Trail. So that's a huge component right there of creating opportunities for physical activity. And then seeing that those users also are exceeding those CDC requirements, their guidelines, right? They're at over an hour of exercise per visit. So now we would expect that obviously of those tourists, right, that are traveling the Empire State Trail or come here for a bike ride or a hiking excursion in the North Country. But we're seeing it on all the users, that they're staying active for longer periods of time, and as we know, that creates much larger health benefits for those individuals. So that's kind of exercise we can ask for. Next. When we break it down by section, you can see these generally follow the same benefits to health as we're seeing as benefits to the economic standpoints. We see those same visitations and similar trends when we look at those health benefits. What I do want to also point out is this transcends those different geographic areas, demographic areas, and the urban populations or rural locations. It's benefiting all people across the entire state. Next slide. Now we look at the environmental benefits. This also runs across the board, right? We look at the metric tons of carbon stored and carbon removed as we're protecting these areas. And this graphic is a great visualization representation. Although there's a trail in conservation, a trail is condensing that impact to one area and allowing for the buffers on either side to continue to have green growth and benefits to the environment. So we calculated that out. No, we did not count the on-road sections. It's a question I'm sure we'll get as part of that, because obviously it's a road. It's not a trail. So this is just looking at the off-road sections of the Empire State Trail. And again, those reduced vehicle miles are not assuming that every single hiker and every pedestrian would have walked up and down that distance. It's saying if they had to go somewhere else to exercise, then that vehicular distance was calculated. And that's $96 million every year, reducing and cars off the street and reducing traffic. And that's one of the speakers at our release earlier this week was the Department of Transportation is ecstatic about this study because they're seeing the benefits of allowing people to do things they love in their daily life and reducing vehicles on the road that are there unnecessarily. So, all right, next slide. And here you can see again, broken down by the different areas. And what's also really interesting to note here is how much larger that environmental benefit is on the Erie Canalway Trail. We see that pull ahead, but obviously it's a much larger area. And that's where that comes through. But even in dense populated areas, we're creating habitat and carbon secretion and tons of metric store. You can see here in the Hudson Valley Greenway, a lot of that is a rural area, but a lot of it is urban areas, and still a huge benefit to the environment. Go ahead, next slide. All right. Here, I think I'll hand it back to Itri to talk about this really exciting tool, which we really were not anticipating being possible from the start. We are kind of shooting from the hip, but as we built out, this is really going to be incredible opportunity for different areas across communities outside of that corridor, the Empire State Trail, to use the methodologies of the study and benefit for their priorities as well. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, sounds good, Michael. This really was developed out of a vision from Dylan and PTNY, the thought being, if we're going to invest our time and resources in this study, can we take what we learn with some of the economic relationships and create a tool that can be applied to all trails throughout the state of New York? So this is in the final stages of development, but ultimately we're looking at a release within the next few months to be housed at PTNY, where if we think about the different components of economic impact and benefit associated with the Empire State Trail. So what are the economic impacts associated with trail tourism? Those 18.7% of users that stay overnight, how would that vary across the state? We've built in some different metrics to account for the different length of the trail, which we found in the literature that once you start to exceed 30 miles, you start to attract people for training for marathons, Ironman. You can also, as you have rich culture and history and trail towns, that becomes another attractor. So the different variables that attract people to tourism, we've accounted for in the tool, and you can find, in an effort to make this more transparent, you can find that information in the lookup tables and sources. But you can head to the next slide. We'll get into a little bit more about the tool. So the purpose of this tool is to be able to evaluate the economic impact and physical benefits of existing and planned trails across New York. I was talking about tourism on the previous slide. There's also the retail benefits received from daily trail users. And then we also evaluate the benefits from businesses reinvesting or making investments to be within proximity to the trail. Physical health benefits, when we think about the annual number of users who are out visiting the trail, what's that increment of physical benefit that each trail user receives? And let's aggregate that and monetize that so that we can quantify that benefit per trail. We also, as part of this tool, look at the benefits associated with carbon emissions reductions associated from changes in VMT. Dylan and Michael spoke about this, but we found that 11% of trail users traveled farther to reach on the trail. 20% of trail users traveled about the same distance, and about 68% of trail users actually traveled much less, so a reduction of 16.3 miles per trip. So in total, we received a net reduction of about 9.9 miles per trip to the Empire State Trail. So these type of relationships are included as some of the defaults in the tool. But then if individual studies are undertaken, you can override those defaults so that you can have a more context specific analysis associated with a trail corridor. And then probably the last thing to mention is that as this gets underway and rolled out, PTNY will be holding the tool and will be able to help facilitate crunching of the numbers and also working through the tool with you. So I think that's all I'd like to share about this tool, but just exciting that we could use the relationships that we found related to economic impact and benefit and be able to apply it to other trails throughout New York. Next slide. And then another thing that we wanted to mention in association with the report We're currently finalizing county level data, economic impact, physical health benefit, and carbon emission savings estimates to be included in an appendix. The report has been released. These details will be included in an appendix that's included soon. So this way, if there's any specific interest in knowing how the trail contributes to your community or your county in New York, that information will be available.
Yeah,
Next slide.
I just want to chime in for a sec and say how important this aspect of the study is, because Governor Hochul really gives a lot of deference to local and county government, right? She's the kind of political leader who really respects local decision making. And so this is really, I think, going to help at all levels of government really to convey the value. Also, when you look at maintenance and you look at how localities are maintaining trail that comes under their purview, we see a lot of variability from county to county. And a lot of counties really understand the trail as an economic driver, for their communities, and some still don't, quite frankly. And so I think this is going to really help us with spurring more local ownership and investment in the trail.
Thank you, Paul. Well said. And then Dylan, I think if you'd like to take it away from here, I'll pass it to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Steve. Just going to wrap up real quick, and then we will have some time for questions at the end. I know some folks have already been putting some questions in the chat, and we've had some questions in the Q&A as well. So folks can submit questions in either location. But if we move to the next slide, I just want to sort of hammer home some of these key findings, some of these major takeaways. These are incredible numbers. These are numbers that, and as Michael said, they're very, we always erred on the side of a conservative approach. And so the fact that we still got to these numbers that really are so weighty is an incredible finding from this study. That nearly 10 million annual visits resulting in 1.8 billion in economic impact, more than 200 million in tax revenue for state and local governments, nearly 10,000 jobs supported. There's so much valuable data that's in this report that really underscores that pure impact of trails to communities across the state. We're excited to continue to dive into the numbers alongside all of you, and we would encourage you, if you're diving in and you see something interesting that you think is a valuable finding to highlight, to reach out to us and let us know, because they're
Speaking of diving into the numbers, I see our colleague Lori Robertson from Walkway over the Hudson had the question in the chat. Does that jobs number include state jobs, or is that just private sector jobs?
That does include state jobs. I'm going to turn it to Steve and Michael to answer that real quick. Yeah.
Sure, I can hop in. So when we talk about that total job number of nearly 9,700, what that's really derived from is when we think about expenditures occurring along the trail, we look at those direct expenditures, and then we model not only the employees supported at those direct locations, but also some of the indirect effects. So think about as businesses make those sales or fulfill those sales, what are the other key inputs to their final production? So if you're a restaurant, are you purchasing napkins, cutlery, other maybe it's menus, whatever helps go into the production of your final goods and services. Those key supply chain businesses, as well as when the employees of those businesses go out and spend money in the economy, that helps generate additional rounds of spending and supports those employees. So we wanted to get a full capture of the economic impact, and that would be for every metric, but specifically focused at jobs. That includes the direct, indirect, and induced jobs that are supported by those expenditures occurring due to the existence of the trail. And then also maybe one other tie into that, we also evaluated business reinvestment. So businesses within proximity of the trail, when money was being reinvested by 41% of those businesses, what was the economic impact of that investment? Hope that's helpful. Dylan, pass back to you.
Thanks, Steve. And I actually think that is a great segue to go into the Q&A section. So Erica, but before we do that real quick, if Erica, you can go to the next slide, just reiterating some of these findings and some of what we want all of you to take away from this report is that, trails, multi-use trails like the Empire State Trail, they're good for our economy, they're good for health, they're good for communities, and it's really at the end of the day, good for the environment as well. There is that finding that I mentioned at the outset that every dollar invested in the trail returned over $5 in economic input. And I think that underscores the wisdom of continued future investment in the trail. And that as we do more investment in building out our off-road trail network, we're going to just continue to create these benefits for more people in more places. Um, and so we're going to have some takeaways for all of you to do with this, some actions that you can take as a follow-up to this report, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So first, this report was made possible thanks to our partners at state government, but also largely thanks to folks who have supported PTNY's work. So if you are not yet a member or a donor to PTNY, I would encourage you to join us today, donate, support our work. We are a nonprofit organization, a statewide nonprofit, and we do really rely on the generosity of our members and donors to make possible the work that we're able to do. I already mentioned this, that we had the great segue earlier, but join one of our bike tours, see the Empire State Trail for yourself, and be part of that economic impact. The sticker price is lower because we want everybody to spend money in these communities that we're exploring along the Empire State Trail. So we have Cycle the Erie Canal on July 11th through 19th, and Cycle the Hudson Valley on August 3rd through 8th. And then share this report out. We're going to be sending a follow-up email to everybody who's on the webinar and folks who registered but weren't able to make it, with some key takeaways, but also with a template letter. We want you to all share this report with your local leaders, with your state representatives. We want you as residents of your communities to make sure that your decision makers are aware of this data, of this findings, of the impact of trails, and either the impact that it's already having to your community if you are from a community that's along the Empire State Trail, or the potential impact to your community if you're from one of the communities where the trail doesn't yet connect, or where it is part of that future, that future statewide greenways network that we're working to see. So with that, I think we're going to jump into the Q&A. So if folks can put questions either in the chat or in the Q&A section, we'll get to as many as we can. I'll be filtering these to Steve and Michael to answer, or to Paul. And I think we're going to jump right in. We had a question right up from the offset from a couple of great trail advocates that we've worked closely with, Tom Benware and Carl Beard, asking about the differentiation between on-road sections and how are roads that have bike lanes or protected bike lanes, are those considered to be on-road or off-road facilities? And Michael and Steve, if you guys can speak to that.
I can touch on it a little bit, and Michael, feel free to add. So when we were thinking about trail facilities and differentiating between on-road and off-road, we primarily used the designation that was available through the GIS attribute table available through the PTNY resources. Within the literature, there's a distinction that's made, and it's really based around safety. So if there is a protected bicycle facility, that generally creates a different type of experience for the user, where there is a higher level of safety, generating a higher level of usage. And then what we also found in the literature is typically in those locations, since there's a higher draw of people, there's generally a higher level of expenditure. So I think that user experience is driving some of the differentiation in how we view usage along those sections, and also potential expenditures along those sections. I don't know, Michael, if you had anything to add to that.
Absolutely, yeah. The user experience was our key differentiation. I saw one question here, I think it may have been related to this, of what about a separate bike lane? And obviously, the physically separated bike lanes are going to provide that safety there, but we really were focused on differentiating by user experience of an on-road trail or an off-road trail where it's on its own and not part of a road structure.
Yeah. All right. Next question. And Steve and Michael, you guys spoke to that really briefly, but Phil had a question about getting to the $1.8 billion figure in economic output. What is that comprised of?
I can launch into that one too. That's really I think when we think about economic modeling, that includes our direct, indirect, and induced effects. So what we found from direct expenditures related to daily trail use, to overnight tourism, into that business reinvestment was about 1.1 billion in economic expenditures. And then as we cycle through the supply chain, there was an additional about 325 million in induced effects. And that's when businesses buy key inputs or key goods and services that help them produce those final goods and services. And then when the employees of those indirect and direct firms go out and spend money in the economy, that generates about an additional $360 million to get to that total sales value or total output of 1.8 billion. So we really have to think about that direct expenditure, where all that expenditure activity is occurring, and then behind the scenes, how those businesses are fulfilling those requests to make the interface with their suppliers to get to those final goods and services. And then that last step of, hey, we've earned our paychecks, where are we going out in the economy and spending our earned dollars?
Awesome.
We
Next we have, oh, go ahead,
one,
Michael.
one quick follow-up to that. So if you want to dig deeper into those numbers, and we encourage that, and this report's all about transparency, in the appendices, we have tables that physically break down, even per segment, those realized and induced economic outputs. So you can really dig into that and vary it by region and populate. It's really exciting. So please jump in the appendices if you're interested in that further information. It's available.
And I will say we have, we're still working on finalizing the appendices. We do have some of that information available on our website currently at the link I put in the chat earlier. There will be some additional detail provided from the appendix. The LaBella team is working hard on getting all of that finalized and getting that so we can make sure that's available to all of you. And related to that, Michael, our partner Ed from Saratoga asked, do we have any demographic info on bike tourists, age, income, etc.?
Yeah, that's not something we were able to gather in this study. So, the key point we focused on were the economics and the impacts, and less of a user profile. Or I saw another question about amenities. Did you include information of roads that have these certain amenities for pets and cyclists and things? And so we had to draw some lines somewhere in order to get to a finish line here. And that was one of the things that we focused more on, that economic impact versus the user profiles outside of how that was related to the economics.
A couple of comments that are here in the chat that I'm just going to kind of speak to. There was a comment specifically about, folks being involved with specific projects, either with connections between the Empire State Trail to nearby communities or, closing gaps in the trail and some of the specifics of different sections of gaps. If there's an ongoing effort and you'd like PTNY support in closing the gap in the trail, I would encourage you to reach out to myself and to Erica, and we'd be happy to work with you. We want to see as many trails built around the state as possible. We'll have our email addresses provided on the next slide, but I'm at dcarey@ptny.org. And we'll be happy to work on those. Also, a mention that thank you to Aaron, who's one of our great bike tour volunteers, mentioned this in the chat, that PTNY also has guidebooks available for purchase to help people who are planning a trip on their own understand where they can stay, where they can go and see some of the sites along the way, and then also where they can spend their money at some of these businesses and bring the impact to those local communities. A question here from one of our great mayors, Rob, from the city or the village of Avon. The trail estimator tool, is that something that you can use independently, or would you work with PTNY for that? And I'll actually take that real quick. We are planning to have it be something that is a full publicly released thing. We want to take a couple of months and really work through it, make sure that we get all the kinks out and really understand how it works before we have it fully out publicly. But in our ability to understand how that works is something where we would ask you folks to come to us with questions about it. It is going to be an estimator tool. We make no claims that it's going to be a perfect calculation of the impact of your trails, but Yeah, it is something that we are aiming to have be a fully public tool down the line once we've had some time to really, grasp it and get our teeth sunk into it. Um, this is one I'm going to actually ask Michael, Steve, and Paul to all answer separately. Of all the bike trails, which one is your favorite?
That's like Sophie's Choice. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the favorite one for me is the one I haven't done yet, and there's so many sections that I still have yet to do, particularly on the Champlain Valley stretch. Um, but I'm partial and just like have tons of love for here in New Paltz, the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, which is part of the Empire State Trail. And one thing that Erica is working on that you'll all see very soon, another report, is how the trail can be leveraged to, for smart land use and development, right? The building I'm in right now is a mixed use development that's a little taller than buildings around here. The zoning here was specifically looking at how can the trail enhance development in smart ways, preserving public access, but also putting density where it belongs to give people access to nature. So look for that report that's really going to help communities, guide zoning and land use policies to get more out of the trail development wise. So that's why this section is near and dear to me, because they've been doing that already.
Yeah. Michael, Steve, you guys want to chime in? I want to get to some of the other questions as well, but so real quick.
My quick answer is the Mohawk Valley section of the Erie Canalway Trail is really I love the history and the culture, and there's so many great ties to you're just traveling down this trail section, and all to your left is this huge lock door just in the middle of the woods, right?
Mhm.
And to see how things have evolved over time, it's a step back in time, and they have some amazing. Obviously, I work in a civil engineering group, so amazing infrastructure they've maintained intact. The aqueducts and things are really incredible in those areas. So and I love the Hudson River Valley Greenway and Champlain. Yeah, mountains. I'm a canal trail guy. I can't do all these hills. It was brutal. So that's where I stick to that section, but I love all the areas as well.
Great.
I'll be a quick response. I'm an out-of-stater, and I've really only spent time on trail sections in Manhattan. So put it in the chat, and I'd love to go try to explore next time I'm visiting. But yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm gonna sit this one on the sidelines.
Fair. We've got a question here. What is your advice for residents to urge their own municipality to maximize the potential benefits from having the trail in your town? And I'm actually going to take this one real quickly because that is that is one of the main things that PTNY does as an organization. We run a program called Trail Towns where we work with communities that are along the trails, along the sections of the Canalway Trail at this time, and hopefully we'll be able to work more in the future with communities along the Hudson Valley Trail to have them realize it. But and we have more information about the Trail Towns program on our website, and we're happy to share that out. But basically, it's informing your elected leaders about this study, making sure that they know that the trail has this benefit. Thinking about the experience that trail users on your trail may have if they're visiting the community for the first time, thinking about where the amenities are, if they're accessible, and then really making sure that you are celebrating the trail from, as a key sort of critical component of your community. I think that places where they embrace the trail and view it as sort of a central element to their identity, those are the places that are really seeing that disproportionate benefit from having the trail go through. Um, we have a more technical question in the chat from Leah. When and where are people replacing car trips with trips made on the trail? Are these commuting to work or to school trips, grocery shopping? And are there any differences in how on or off-road trail segments facilitate those trips substitutions?
I'll jump on that one because a lot of that information was gathered during our surveying process. And it's a horrible answer I hate to give, but it depends on what area of the trail you're utilizing, right? But yes is another bad but accurate answer. All of those things. A lot of individuals are using that for going to get groceries. It was incredible, especially in the Hudson River Valley region. I was traveling there. How many people I saw with grocery bags going back and forth, utilizing transportation that way. The primary response when we did the survey was gathered around exercise. and going out and those health benefits, that they were able to ride a bike to and connect and then use the trail for long distance bike rides or hiking daily, versus having to go to a park or travel somewhere via car. And that's where we saw the largest component. But I wanted to highlight those other ones first for it's a variety of reasons. But it really shines a light on the importance of connecting to trail networks in your communities, and another way to bring up to your elected officials and local leaders of your communities to tie into all trail networks. This isn't just the Empire State Trail, but any trail in New York is going to be a benefit to the health of your community and reduce vehicular traffic. We saw that continually across our survey.
Just a quick note that came in chat that thank you to Mona from Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor for flagging this, and also thank you to Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor for contributing a number of the photos used in the report. That Erie Canal did complete an amenities study for the Erie section of the Empire State Trail and is working on the same study for the Champlain Canal and the Canalway Trail. So check out that report from Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor to look at some of the places where amenities are existing today and where there might be gaps. And for your community, look at what is still out there as an opportunity. It is 1 o'clock, so I do want to make sure we're not taking up too much of folks' time. We did get a number of great questions in the chat. If we weren't able to get to your question, we do encourage you to send us an email. Erica, if you want to go to the next slide, we've got some information on how folks can reach us. You can email us. That is our general ptny@ptny.org email, or I will put my email in the chat as well as my colleague Erica's email. I would encourage Michael and Steve, if you guys are willing, if you put your emails in the chat, or feel free if folks want to email us and their questions that are better suited to direct to Michael and Steve, we can absolutely forward those along. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We are so excited to be able to share this report with you. And Paul, do you want to have the last word here?
Oh, gosh. I just want to say that if we win this major new state investment in the trail network that Dylan was talking about, right? Those 3 parts, filling in the gaps, making those last mile connections so that more communities are connected to the network, and then funding those big major expansions like the O&W here in Ulster County, the Long Island Greenway, Niagara, Erie, Shoreline Greenway there. There's so many great and deserving projects. If we win this funding, I think it will be partly because of this great report, but it will have more to do with all of you caring enough to get involved, taking those 3 actions that Dylan mentioned earlier, joining PTNY, sharing the report with your local representatives, and what was the third one?
Joining our bike tours and seeing it for yourself. Yes,
joining our bike tours, where you can ride with us, and we're gonna have a great time. It's great food, great way to meet folks, and you feed your head too. You get like all the culture, all the history, all the advocacy. So thanks for being a part of the PTNY community, and thanks for being part of this movement to bring nature more into people's lives.
Thank you, everybody.